In 1980, a 25-year-old college dropout walked into IBM headquarters and promised to deliver an operating system he didn't own, hadn't built, and had no rights to. IBM's lawyers reviewed the contract, signed it, handed Microsoft the licensing rights to the most important software in personal computing history without realizing what they were giving away. Bill Gates paid $50,000 for a program called Quick and Dirty Operating System, cleaned it up, renamed it MS-DOS, then licensed it to every PC manufacturer on Earth while IBM watched. That $50,000 purchases the foundation of a $3 trillion empire. And IBM's lawyers made it possible. Bill Gates was not a visionary in the way the biographies describe him. He was obsessive, ruthless, and competitive to a degree that made everyone around him uncomfortable. He was born in Seattle in 1955 to a wealthy family. His father was a prominent lawyer, his mother sat on corporate boards. He had every advantage. He didn't coast on any of them. At 13, he was writing software on a school computer terminal. By 17 he had built a traffic analysis program called TrafoData that made $20,000. At 19 he dropped out of Harvard. His mother was furious. He told her he would be a millionaire before he turned 30. He was worth $1 billion by 31. At Harvard, he met Paul Allen. The two of them shared one obsession: personal computers were coming and whoever controlled the software would control everything. They didn't wait for the opportunity. They manufactured it. In 1975, they founded Microsoft with one bet: that software, not hardware, was the future of personal computing. Nobody in the industry believed them yet. IBM least of all. By 1980, IBM had watched the personal computer market grow around them and decided to build their own. They needed an operating system, the core software that makes a computer run. Their first call went to Gary Kildall. He had built CP/M, the dominant operating system of the era, running on millions of machines. He was the obvious choice. The only choice, really. IBM flew to Pacific Grove, California to meet him. Kildall wasn't there. Accounts differ on exactly why. Some say he was flying his personal plane, others say he had a prior commitment. His wife, Dorothy, handled the meeting instead. She refused to sign IBM's non-disclosure agreement without a lawyer present. IBM left without a deal. They called Gates. Microsoft had no operating system. Gates knew it. He said yes anyway and told IBM he could deliver exactly what they needed. He had no idea yet how he was going to do it. Gates made two calls. The first was to a small Seattle company called Seattle Computer Products. They had built a rough operating system called QDOS, Quick and Dirty Operating System, designed to run on Intel chips. It wasn't polished. It wasn't finished. It worked. Gates paid $50,000 for the full rights. Tim Patterson, the programmer who built it, had no idea about the IBM deal. Seattle Computer Products had no idea they were sitting on the most valuable software in personal computing history. They took the $50,000 and moved on. The second call Gates made was to his own lawyer. He structured the IBM licensing deal with a single non-negotiable condition: Microsoft retained the rights to license MS-DOS to any other manufacturer. IBM could use it. IBM just couldn't own it exclusively. IBM's legal team reviewed it. They were focused on hardware, the machine, the chips, the manufacturing. Software was an afterthought. They signed. Gates had just licensed the operating system that would run on every IBM-compatible PC on Earth. Every manufacturer who copied IBM's design, and hundreds did, needed MS-DOS. Every single one paid Bill Gates. Seattle Computer Products received $50,000 total. Microsoft received licensing fees for 2 decades straight. IBM's mistake wasn't signing the contract. Their mistake was a fundamental misunderstanding of where the value in personal computing actually lived. IBM believed the hardware was the business. The machine. The physical product you could hold. Software was a commodity, something you bundled with the hardware to make it work. They had been building mainframe computers for decades on exactly that logic. Gates understood something IBM didn't. In a world where anyone could manufacture a PC, the hardware would eventually become cheap and replaceable. The software, the thing every machine needed to run, would become irreplaceable. Within 3 years, IBM-compatible PCs were everywhere. Compaq, Dell, HP, hundreds of manufacturers building IBM-compatible machines at lower prices than IBM could. Every single one running MS-DOS. Every single one paying Microsoft. By 1985, MS-DOS was running on 30 million computers. IBM had built the personal computer industry. Gates had installed a toll booth at the only entrance. IBM's share of the PC market they invented dropped from 70% in 1983 to under 30% by 1986. Microsoft's revenue grew from $7 million in 1980 to $140 million in 1985. Gates didn't build a $3 trillion company by being the smartest person in the room. He built it by being the most aggressive. In 1988, Apple sued Microsoft for copying the visual interface of the Macintosh in Windows. Steve Jobs had shown Gates the Macintosh interface in 1983 as a gesture of goodwill between two companies he considered allies. Gates took notes. 2 years later Windows looked remarkably similar. Apple lost the lawsuit on a technicality. Gates had secured a license agreement in 1985 that Apple's own lawyers had approved without reading carefully enough. In the mid-1990s, Netscape Navigator was the dominant internet browser with 90% market share. Microsoft built Internet Explorer, bundled it free with every copy of Windows, and made it impossible to remove. Netscape went from 90% market share to irrelevant in 3 years. The U.S. Department of Justice called it illegal monopolistic behavior. In 2000, a federal judge ruled Microsoft had violated antitrust law and ordered the company broken into 2 separate entities. Gates fought it. The ruling was eventually overturned on appeal. Microsoft stayed intact. Internally, Gates ran one of the most brutal performance cultures in Silicon Valley. Stack ranking, a system where employees were graded on a curve and the bottom performers fired regardless of actual output, created a culture where colleagues sabotaged each other rather than collaborated. Former employees described it as a place where the safest career move was making sure the person next to you failed. 2000. The antitrust ruling shook Microsoft to its foundation. Gates stepped down as CEO and handed the role to Steve Ballmer. The stock peaked at $58 per share in December 1999, and spent the next 13 years going nowhere. By 2012, it sat at $26. Google owned Search. Apple owned iPhone. Amazon owned Cloud. Microsoft owned the desktop, a shrinking market nobody was fighting over anymore. Then in 2014, the board removed Ballmer and replaced him with Satya Nadella, an engineer who had spent his career inside Microsoft's cloud division. Nadella made one call that changed everything. He stopped trying to own the device and started trying to own the infrastructure every device ran on. Azure, Microsoft's cloud computing platform. Every company that needed computing power, storage, and software infrastructure paid Microsoft. Not once. Every month. Forever. By 2019, Microsoft crossed $1 trillion in market value. By 2024 it crossed $3 trillion, the most valuable company on Earth. 13 years of stagnation erased in a decade by one strategic pivot. Gary Kildall built the operating system that should have powered the personal computer revolution. He missed one meeting. He died in 1994, worth a few $1 million. His operating system CP/M is a paragraph in a history textbook. Tim Patterson built QDOS in 4 months and sold it for $50,000. He had no idea what he was selling. Seattle Computer Products later sued Microsoft when they found out about the IBM deal. They settled for $925,000. Gates had already made hundreds of millions from the same software. IBM's lawyers signed a contract that handed Microsoft the personal computer industry. IBM filed for bankruptcy protection on its personal computer division in 2005. They exited the PC business entirely, the business they invented. Bill Gates dropped out of Harvard at 19. Paid $50,000 for a program called Quick and Dirty. Walked into IBM with nothing and left with everything. Built a $3 trillion empire on a licensing clause nobody questioned. One meeting Gary Kildall missed. One contract IBM's lawyers didn't read carefully enough. One $50,000 check Tim Patterson cashed without asking why. That's all it took.